You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. To Kill a Mockingbird wasn't just a courtroom drama. It was a cultural earthquake disguised as a quiet Southern tale. Behind the lens, chaos simmered, racial tensions on set, a child star under immense pressure, Gregory Peck battling personal grief. What audiences saw as calm simplicity was built on complex, fragile foundations. Today, we're pulling back the curtain to reveal 20 weird and shocking facts about To Kill a Mockingbird, stories of casting drama, dangerous conditions, and legacy-shaping choices. And stay tuned for the bonus fact, a revelation so strange and little known that even lifelong fans will be stunned. Let's dive in. Gregory Peck's role was written in his blood. Gregory Peck didn't just play Atticus Finch, he poured his personal grief into the role. Just before filming began, Peck lost his beloved father. The wound was fresh, and instead of hiding it, he channeled that heartbreak into every courtroom speech, every quiet glance. On set, colleagues noticed his silences between takes, his tendency to sit alone, still wrapped in mourning clothes. Horton Foote, the screenwriter, later admitted that Atticus became a man stitched together from Peck's own grief. What audiences saw as calm dignity was in fact a performance carved out of raw sorrow. This wasn't acting as escape, it was survival. The tragedy of a real father's absence deepened the fictional father's presence, giving Atticus Finch the haunted gravitas that made him immortal. Harper Lee cried on set the first time she saw Peck in costume. When Harper Lee visited the set and saw Gregory Peck step out in Atticus Finch's glasses and suit, she broke down in tears. "That's my father," she whispered. Lee's real-life father, Amasa Coleman Lee, had inspired the character. Peck bore such an uncanny resemblance, stooped posture, soft-spoken cadence, that Lee gifted him her father's own pocket watch. He wore it during filming, quietly carrying a piece of her family history into every frame. It wasn't just costuming, it was resurrection. Crew members felt the weight in the air that day, as if Peck wasn't just playing a role, but channeling a spirit. The watch ticked on in scenes we still watch today, binding fiction and reality in one seamless, devastating gesture. Mary Badham's innocence was painfully real. Mary Badham, who played Scout, wasn't a trained actress. She was plucked straight from Alabama childhood and dropped into Hollywood legend. She had never read the book, never memorized a script. Director Robert Mulligan encouraged her to speak in her own rhythms, to stumble over words, to look away when nervous. That's why her performance feels so startlingly authentic. It wasn't performance. On set, she often didn't know where the cameras were or when scenes had officially begun. Peck protected her fiercely, coaching her like a surrogate father. Years later, Badham said she truly thought of Peck as Atticus off-screen, a bond so real it lasted until his death in 2003. What we see on screen is not an actress acting, it is a child living, unfiltered, before the camera's gaze. A racist audience tried to sabotage the premiere. The film premiered in Gregory Peck's hometown of Monrovia, California. But when it came time to screen in the South, chaos erupted. In some towns, theaters faced protests. Anonymous calls threatened violence if black and white audiences were allowed to watch together. Universal Pictures debated whether to stage segregated showings to avoid disaster. In Alabama, ushers were stationed at exits in case fights broke out. Yet, despite the danger, the movie triumphed, sparking discussions that many communities had avoided for decades. Watching it in 1962 wasn't a casual evening at the movies, it was a political act. The screen became a battlefield, and the simple act of buying a ticket became an act of defiance. Brock Peters faced hostility. During filming, Brock Peters, who played Tom Robinson, endured a brutal double reality. On screen, he faced a racist courtroom. Off screen, he faced whispers and open hostility from some Southern crew members. Peters later recalled that filming the trial scenes felt like living through two trials at once, fictional and real. Gregory Peck made it his mission to protect Peters. During one lunch break, when Peters was refused service at a local diner, Peck walked out with him and never returned to that establishment. Their friendship lasted for decades, and Peters even delivered the eulogy at Peck's funeral. What audiences didn't know was that the bond between Atticus and Tom Robinson stretched far beyond the celluloid. It was forged in the heat of real discrimination, and it endured long after the cameras stopped rolling. The Finch house wasn't a real home. What looked like a cozy Southern family home on screen was nothing but an elaborate facade. The Finch house, with its creaky porch and shaded yard, was built entirely on a Hollywood backlot. The production team studied real Alabama houses, copying architectural details like warped shutters and peeling paint. Yet inside, nothing existed. Every room was filmed on a separate soundstage. Mary Badham, who played Scout, remembered being shocked when she first discovered she couldn't open the door and walk inside. It was a reminder that childhood wonder had been recreated plank by plank, nail by nail, but never truly lived in. This illusion of domestic intimacy is part of what made audiences feel like they were stepping into Maycomb. But behind the camera, it was all plywood, lights, and wires. Robert Duvall's first screen role nearly didn't happen. Robert Duvall, who played the mysterious Boo Radley, was virtually unknown at the time. He almost didn't get cast. Producers feared his pale complexion and unsettling stillness would appear too strange for audiences. But director Robert Mulligan insisted, saying Duvall's silence would speak louder than dialogue. On set, Duvall avoided sunlight, stayed away from crew members, and practiced keeping his face expressionless. His method-style preparation gave Boo an eerie, ghost-like aura. Audiences felt both fear and compassion in his presence. Today it's hard to imagine anyone else in the role, but at the time, studio executives whispered that he was the gamble no one wanted. That gamble launched one of Hollywood's most respected careers. Boo Radley's haunting stare was the spark that ignited Robert Duvall's legend. Gregory Peck fought the studio over Atticus's speeches. Universal Pictures worried that Atticus's lengthy courtroom monologues would bore audiences. Executives pushed for cuts, suggesting Gregory Peck deliver shorter, punchier lines. Peck refused. He told the director, "If you cut Atticus, you cut the heart out of him." Robert Mulligan sided with Peck, even threatening to walk if the speeches were trimmed. In the end, Peck delivered Atticus's full summation, a nearly 6-minute stretch filmed in a single take. Crew members described the set as so silent, you could hear the air. That scene went on to win Peck his Academy Award and became one of the most quoted speeches in film history. What executives saw as dead air was in fact the film's living pulse. The power of words, unbroken, uncompromised, is what cemented Atticus Finch in cinema's moral canon. The Mockingbird symbol almost got cut. The studio initially doubted the significance of the Mockingbird metaphor. Executives argued that modern audiences wouldn't get it and wanted to remove references entirely. Harper Lee fought furiously, warning that without the Mockingbird, the film would lose its soul. Even director Robert Mulligan admitted that the symbolism risked coming across as too literary. But Peck defended it, saying, "The Mockingbird is what makes this story timeless." In the end, the metaphor stayed, immortalizing the line, "It's a sin to kill a mockingbird." Without that symbol, the film might have been remembered as just another courtroom drama. Instead, it became a universal fable about innocence and cruelty. The bird survived the editing shears, and in doing so, gave the movie its wings. The child actors weren't shielded from heavy themes, unlike modern productions where child actors are often shielded from disturbing subject matter. Mary Badham, Scout, and Philip Alford, Jim, were exposed to the full weight of the script. They sat through trial scenes, listened to racial slurs, and absorbed the atmosphere of prejudice. Director Robert Mulligan believed the raw reactions of children would only work if they understood the stakes. He instructed them to listen as if it's real. Crew members worried the kids were too young to handle it, but Peck took on a paternal role, explaining themes gently between takes. The authenticity in their performances came at a cost, innocence stripped by exposure to the very ugliness the story condemned. The irony is brutal. The children who taught audiences about innocence lost theirs in the process. And before we move on, go ahead and like and subscribe, because the next 10 facts are even wilder, from hidden on-set disasters to casting fights that nearly sank the film. The courtroom was built to control every detail. The courtroom scenes feel authentic because they weren't filmed in a real courthouse. Instead, production designers built an exact replica on the Universal backlot. They even made the ceiling removable so cameras could swoop down for sweeping shots. The wooden benches were distressed to look worn from decades of use, while the judge's bench was slightly elevated to impose authority. Every fan, paper, and gavel was chosen to mimic Depression-era Alabama. The result? A set so convincing that even Alabama natives swore it looked like their own courthouses. Ironically, what audiences took as raw realism was the product of absolute artificiality, every beam, every nail carefully staged. The film's realism wasn't born from accident, but from total control. What viewers saw as natural Southern air was in fact a Hollywood-crafted illusion of justice. Gregory Peck's glasses became a weapon. One of the film's most famous moments, Atticus dropping and fumbling his glasses, wasn't in the script. Peck accidentally let them slip during filming, but director Robert Mulligan kept the take. That slip transformed Atticus from an untouchable hero into a human father, vulnerable and imperfect. Audiences gasped not at the mistake, but at its emotional weight. The glasses became a symbol: knowledge, fragility, humanity. Critics later wrote that the moment encapsulated the film's entire theme, the strength of decency born from human weakness. What could have been an embarrassing blooper became one of the movie's most powerful metaphors. Sometimes accidents make the best art, and in this case, a clumsy pair of glasses reframed one of cinema's greatest heroes. The Radley house had its own ghost story. The Radley house wasn't just creepy on film, it unnerved the crew in real life. Built on a Hollywood lot, the decaying exterior attracted superstition. Some crew swore they heard unexplained noises at night. Others joked it was haunted by Boo himself. The dilapidated set became so convincing that child actors avoided it when cameras weren't rolling. Philip Alford, who played Jim, admitted he wouldn't walk past it alone. Universal even stationed a night watchman because locals tried to sneak onto the lot to see the haunted house from Mockingbird. What audiences never knew is that even off-screen, the Radley home radiated fear. It wasn't just a set, it was a presence, looming over cast and crew like a phantom woven into the wood. Peck secretly paid a crew member's medical bills. Gregory Peck wasn't just a star, he was a quiet protector behind the scenes. During production, a crew member fell seriously ill and couldn't afford treatment. Peck quietly stepped in, paying the medical bills without telling anyone. The gesture only came to light decades later when the man's family revealed it. Peck never sought credit, but his generosity reflected the same moral compass as Atticus Finch. For the cast and crew, it blurred the line between actor and role. Was Peck embodying Atticus, or was Atticus simply Peck? That overlap is what made his performance unforgettable. It wasn't just on screen that he fought for justice and decency. He lived it, even when no one was watching. The film nearly faced censorship for inappropriate themes. Despite its critical acclaim, To Kill a Mockingbird almost faced censorship battles. Some censors argued the movie's frank portrayal of racial prejudice and false rape accusations was too incendiary for wide release. Studio lawyers braced for bans in certain southern states. At one point, executives suggested softening the language of racial slurs to pass local boards. But director Robert Mulligan resisted, saying the ugliness of the words was essential to the story's truth. Against the odds, the film was released largely uncut. Its honesty shocked some audiences and inspired others, sparking heated debate across the country. The fact that the movie even existed in 1962 was a miracle, and a quiet act of rebellion against the very society it portrayed. Elmer Bernstein's score was almost rejected. The gentle, haunting score by Elmer Bernstein is now iconic, but executives initially balked at its simplicity. They expected sweeping orchestral grandeur for a courtroom drama. Instead, Bernstein composed a sparse piano-driven theme that evoked childhood innocence and fragile memory. Studio heads worried it lacked power, but director Robert Mulligan defended it, saying, "The music shouldn't shout, it should whisper." When audiences heard the lilting piano notes paired with the opening credits, children's drawings and toys, they understood instantly this wasn't just a courtroom story, but a child's memory of injustice. The score became a masterclass in restraint. What nearly got scrapped for being too quiet instead gave the film its timeless heartbeat, reminding us that sometimes whispers echo louder than shouts. Harper Lee almost walked away from Hollywood. Harper Lee was notoriously protective of her novel. She visited the set often, questioning dialogue changes and character portrayals. At one point, she clashed with screenwriter Horton Foote over condensing subplots, particularly the Finch family's backstory. Lee feared Hollywood would dilute her book into another melodrama. She considered withdrawing her support altogether. But Gregory Peck personally reassured her, promising the film would guard the spirit of the book. Peck's involvement changed her mind, and her trust in him became legendary. In later years, Lee said she never would have allowed the adaptation without him. What fans didn't know is that To Kill a Mockingbird nearly lost Harper Lee's blessing entirely, and without her approval, the film might never have been made. A torn call sheet revealed studio panic. In Universal's archives, researchers found a torn call sheet from the production, marked in red pencil, "Controversy Risk, Limit Exposure." The studio feared backlash from segregationist audiences and even debated whether to downplay Gregory Peck's involvement during marketing. Executives labeled the project high risk, low return. Some insiders argued it would flop outside northern cities. Yet when the film premiered, it defied every prediction, winning 3 Oscars and grossing millions. That fragile, torn call sheet stands today as proof of the studio's doubt. What they feared would sink their reputation instead became their crown jewel. Sometimes the greatest art emerges not from confidence, but from deep uncertainty and a willingness to gamble everything. Peck's Oscar acceptance hid a secret struggle. When Gregory Peck won the Academy Award for Best Actor, he delivered his speech with quiet gratitude, but privately, he battled immense pressure and doubt. He had feared the role would define him so completely that he'd never escape Atticus Finch's shadow. After the ceremony, Peck reportedly confessed to friends, "How do you top Atticus?" That fear haunted him for years, even as he continued a celebrated career. The irony is sharp. Winning Hollywood's highest honor didn't give him peace. It burdened him with expectations. Still, Peck accepted that if he was forever linked to one role, it was the right one. The award was both triumph and chain, a reminder that greatness always comes with a cost. The film was used in real-life legal training. What audiences may not know is that To Kill a Mockingbird became more than entertainment. It became a teaching tool. Law schools and bar associations began screening the film for students, using Atticus Finch's defense as an example of ethics, empathy, and courage in practice. Judges even referenced Atticus in legal opinions, calling him a model for lawyers everywhere. The fictional courtroom of Maycomb seeped into real ones, shaping generations of attorneys. It wasn't just art imitating life, it was art reshaping life. The movie blurred the line between cinematic morality and real-world justice, proving that sometimes fiction can be the sharpest legal precedent of all. Gregory Peck's daughter appeared in the film. In one of the trial sequences, a young woman can be seen sitting quietly in the colored balcony, listening to Atticus's summation. That wasn't just an extra, it was Gregory Peck's real-life daughter, Cecilia. Peck asked director Robert Mulligan if she could appear, and Mulligan agreed. The cameo was never publicized, but Cecilia later said it was a secret way of standing beside my father. The choice carried symbolic weight. His real family literally sat among the marginalized, watching Atticus defend justice. It blurred life and art. And though audiences never knew, for Peck it was a deeply personal gesture. His own child watching him embody the father figure he wished the world had more of. The Maycomb extras were real Southerners. To capture authenticity, the filmmakers cast dozens of locals from Monroeville, Alabama, Harper Lee's hometown, as courtroom extras. Many of them had lived through Jim Crow segregation and brought raw, unscripted reactions to the set. Director Robert Mulligan encouraged them to respond as if it were happening. That's why the jury's stares, the whispers in the gallery, and the uneasy silence feel so unnervingly real. They weren't just acting, they were reliving echoes of their own town's history. Some even admitted afterward that participating forced them to confront uncomfortable truths about racism in their community. What viewers saw wasn't Hollywood imagination, it was lived Southern memory, pressed directly into the film's celluloid. Bonus fact: Peck's lasting bond with Harper Lee. The most surprising detail? Gregory Peck and Harper Lee became so close that she called him her second father. Years later, when Lee was awarded the Presidential Medal of Freedom, Peck was by her side. And when Peck died in 2003, Lee reportedly wept as if she'd lost Atticus Finch all over again. Their friendship transcended Hollywood, merging author and actor into one enduring family. The line between real and fictional father blurred forever. Atticus Finch lived not only on film, but in the private devotion between two souls bound by one extraordinary story.